Hello and welcome to Comics Corner number 5. I'm Oren.
And I'm Michelle. And can I just say up front, thank God for the editing button, because I think we have gone through like 5 attempts of getting this thing started now.
This is take 36 of Comics Corner podcast number 5.
I feel like we should have video cameras set up to release the, for the very special DVD extras of this podcast. We should have
the blooper reel.
Behind the scenes.
Speaking of behind the scenes, we have been working and we have put together a whole new website and social media empire based around Comics Corner.
We have been busy little beavers.
So this is the first Comics Corner podcast that is being hosted on comicscornerpodcast.com, which is the site that we've set up to host these podcasts from here on out. So thank you very much, by the way, for making this podcast popular enough to actually warrant its own domain. And this, believe it or not, this was not started just by our own greed and lust for empire, but in fact, we got a notice from our previous host, or not previous host, but the host of Michelle's site where we've been hosting Comics Corner. And we were told that we were pushing our bandwidth limit because so many people were interested in the podcast. So we went ahead and we got another domain just for this. So thank you very much, and we hope to keep it enjoyable.
Yeah, and check out the new website, which is, once again, comicscornerpodcast.com. We'll put up our show notes that'll have more links and info about the various things that we talk about in the podcast. There will probably be fun other posts and links of things that we find interesting. So check it out. Hopefully it'll be a fun and interesting website to visit in addition to listening to the podcast.
Yeah, and we'll let you know about stuff also via the social media that we've set up around it as well. There is the Twitter account at Comics Podcast. So that's twitter.com/comicspodcast, where we'll keep you up to date with what we've added to the site, and probably just gibber and jabber because we are gibberers and jabberers, which is, of course, why we have a podcast. There's also a Facebook page, which I cannot possibly give you the address to, because you know how they do their fan pages. It's like the name, Comics Corner or whatever, but then they add 659-732.
So I think we can just safely say that if you go to Facebook, or if you go to the website,
it's on
there's
the
a
website
link there, or if you go to Facebook, you can do a search for Comics Corner, and it will show up.
Absolutely. We'll also be doing, like we were laughing about, some video and stuff. We have YouTube and Vimeo, and there will be more. So if you like what you've got, hopefully we'll keep doing nice stuff in various media forms.
Yes. So now that all that kind of boring stuff is out of the way, why don't we get to the comics?
All right. So
what are we talking about first?
Well, last week we had started talking about Fear itself, and that we were looking forward to reading Fear itself. So now that we have Fear itself, and we have read Fear itself #1, why don't we talk a little about that?
Okay.
So Fear itself #1 is the 7-part miniseries written by Matt Fraction with art by Stuart Immonen.
Uh-huh.
And what did you think?
Wow, putting me on the spot. I thought you were going to give your opinions first.
Oh,
okay.
I can.
No, that's all right. I'm here. I can do it. So yeah, this was the first issue. As I think I've talked about on the podcast before, I will be very upfront and say that I am more of a DC girl than a Marvel girl. So I'm much more familiar with the DC characters than the Marvel characters. So coming at it from that perspective, I think I'm maybe not the best judge because I don't know a lot of the characters' history and minutia and the little story arcs that have gone on before. So I felt like, I guess this was a very well written issue. It was interesting. It was engaging. It made me want to know what happens next. It made me want to read the next issue, which I suppose for a first issue is ultimately the goal.
Sure, they want to get you hooked.
You know, and I was able to follow the story without a problem, but I just felt like there were references to things that had happened in past continuity that I just wasn't aware of with some of the more peripheral characters.
Sure,
and things like that.
I'm sorry. I was gonna
Go ahead.
agree with you and say that as I discussed last time, one of the reasons I was interested in Fear itself is because Matt Fraction had said that you wouldn't need a PhD in continuity to get the story, and you wouldn't need to read 70 additional issues stretched among and between all of Marvel's line in order to get the full story, that this will be a full story and that you won't need the whole continuity thing, although if you want the deep cuts, if you want that, it's there for you. And I feel the same. I think I know a little bit more Marvel than you. I've read more Iron Man and Thor and Fantastic Four and Hulk and things in the past, so I knew some of that. But at the same time, I haven't kept up with them all, and so I don't know continuity. And while on the one hand, I agree with Fraction that not knowing the story of the Red Skull's daughter, I was able to get into this first issue, which involves her and her quest for the God of Fear. I was able to get into that without knowing her backstory. So as just a standalone story, this did work. On the other hand, this story begins with Steve Rogers, who's no longer Captain America, standing with a girl named Sharon. And if you don't know recent continuity, that's going to be a bit of a head scratcher. And in fact, both of us were, after we read it, kind of like, who's Sharon?
I went and looked it up.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a hard thing to find out these days with the interwebs. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'd give Fraction, on the one hand, I'll give him a pass on that, because though I can see what he means, that you don't need the PhD in continuity, you also can't come in cold, because Sharon, for example, is never explained. The relationship between Steve Rogers and Sharon is never explained at any point. She's just there, and then it moves on. So it's one of those things where she's so prominent in the beginning. It's literally just Steve Rogers and her and a riot going on. So she's not just a peripheral character at that point, but if you don't know the past, you won't know who she is.
I felt honestly that it wasn't important. You knew that she was part of the team, and that was all that really you needed to know.
I was just curious, did she have superpowers, or who was she?
I guess I feel like I'm maybe not the best person to review this one, just because I don't have all of the background in all of the Marvel characters. I'd be curious to know what our listeners out there in podcast land, who are more well versed in Marvel history and backstory, what they think. So if you email or comment, I'd just be curious to know what people who are up on all of the continuity and all of the backstory think of this new event.
Yeah, if you're paying attention to this event and you are a Marvel fan who's up on continuity, that would be great. I'd also like to hear from the opposite. If you don't know anything about Marvel and their continuity, but were just interested, and maybe you saw the preview or the trailer and got excited about it like we did, what do you think? Do you agree with us? Do you also find that it was followable, but maybe a little bit more confusing? Because ultimately, when they do these big events, they do sort of have a dual purpose. On the one hand, it's like, throwing a bone to the fans, the people who love this stuff. It's giving something back to the fans that they can really, get into, and all the lines and everything else. But they are trying to bring in new people.
Sure.
So I think it's interesting to talk about how successful they were at that. And speaking of success, no comic is successful without the art. So what did you think of the artwork?
I liked it. I really like Stuart Immonen's work. I've seen his work on past things as well. I think he gets action and dynamic movement in his scenes. I think he does a great job of just drawing your eye through the page and drawing your focus to what's important. There's a panel I love, the dragons, I guess, the sea serpents, dragons, whatever they are, that are guarding the entrance to the prison or
something like
whatever.
We don't want to give too much away, but there's dragons guarding something important
in the deep sea in the Marianas Trench. I thought that was just a beautiful panel.
I agree.
It was the combination of the art and the color.
Yeah, I was going to say the colorist, I think, does a really great job, and I'm looking at the credits, and they don't actually say who specifically did the coloring. There's just a big list of people.
We'll have to look that up and put it on the show notes of the website.
Yeah, I'm going to guess it's Laura Martin.
I'm not sure.
Just because she's next in line. She may be the inker.
Let's not discuss something we don't know. We'll look it up and make sure we put the proper credits on the website.
So, any other thoughts on? I agree. I really like the art. I think sometimes on kind of the mid-depth panels, especially when there's a lot of people around, I think he makes the choice to sort of go really simple on the faces, which sometimes is just a little distracting. If the previous panels were looking at someone's head, and then the next panel, it's like they're sort of a flat eyes and mouth. But, like you said, the panels that are sort of the money shots, as they say, really make up for it. All right, so let's move on to one of yours, The Walking Dead.